Good morning. Welcome to the National Museum of American History. And we are continuing our conversation for the 10th anniversary of Jazz Appreciation Month of Women and Jazz Transforming a Nation. So we are especially delighted to have an esteemed group of musicians and of living history on our stage today in the form of the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. The International Sweethearts of Rhythm is the nation's first integrated all-female big band. Started at the Piney Woods School in 1937 and was the inspiration of the school's founder, Lawrence Clifton Jones. The founder's daughter, Helen Jones Woods, was the founding member of the band, one of the first members of the band, and the assembly of people that you see here today represent 5 individuals who started at that school when they were 13, 14, and 15 years old. Many of them without any musical backgrounds at all, learning how to play jazz, not only for their love of the music, but because this was an opportunity and a way for them to receive an education. So we are delighted that we're going to have 2 very, very wonderful and esteemed co-moderators that will facilitate the conversation today. And one of the moderators is Sally Placksin, who is an esteemed radio producer, National Public Radio, also is a historian in relation to women and jazz, who was author of a book of 100 Years of History of Women and Jazz. And along with Sally, we have legendary media pioneer and a hometown legend in a sense, even though she was originally from Omaha, but Cathy Hughes has, within the Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, a wonderful history in terms of a pioneer in media. And so this is Cathy Hughes, founder of Radio One and later TV One, and I am proud to turn this discussion over to her.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joanne. One of the things I think that Sally and I would like to do today, if it's all right with all of you, is have a conversation as opposed to just a straight interview. And we would also encourage you all to talk with each other. So Sally is going to kind of kick it off with some questions, and then just pitch in anytime you think you want to add to someone else's story, or maybe if someone's memory has got it a little different than your memory, share what your memory is, all right? But don't be shy. Sally, you want to start it?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm honored to be here with these amazing women. Let me start by going back to the beginnings of the band. For people who don't know, in Piney Woods, the Piney Woods Country Life School, what do you remember about the very beginnings of the Sweethearts? How did it come about? Lawrence C. Jones was very visionary, the founder of the school, and you were in a marching band initially. What was that about, and what was the transition like into the beginnings of the Sweethearts? Let me ask Miss Sims. Yeah.
I went to Piney Woods when I was 13 years old. I was there at 13, 14, and 15. And because I had taken piano lessons, I knew the rudiments of music, and to help offset some of my tuition at the school, I was put in the brass band. And I was a trombonist. I soon learned. And as a part of the musician brass band, we played festivals, parades, county fairs, and concerts. We traveled in a bus, and it was about 2 years later, the idea of a jazz band came up for the girls, because Piney Woods had 2 jazz bands for the boys. And around 13, 14, and 15, I started with the trombonists, with Helen. We were the two trombonists in the brass band. And we had Miss Consuela Carter with the idea of a jazz band. And we were taught the jazz music. And we traveled. It was a very, very good experience. I remember one of the first things in the jazz band, at that time, if any of you are my age, we had Christopher Columbus. If you remember that, the slide trombone. And it was fun, you know, sliding that trombone, Christopher Columbus.
That's what you called your trombone?
At that age.
That was the name of the trombone?
That was the name of a very, very popular tune at that time.
Oh,
jazz
it was
tune,
a jazz
Christopher
tune.
Columbus.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it was. Very, very popular. I remember that being one of the first things that we were taught. And we traveled in the bus.
How'd you pick the trombone?
When I went to Piney Woods, we had Miss Consuela Carter. She said, I need another trombonist, and you are it. I'm not changing you. Because, you know, if you didn't do well with one instrument, they would try you on another. My sister was also with me, and of course, she played the French horn. And, but she said, I need a trombonist. And at that time, you know, we did what we were told to do.
There were not many role models for you then. I mean, now we'll talk about role models and how do young girls decide what they want to do, get to see what people are doing. Were there any women musicians that you knew about when you started in the band? Were there any models that you knew?
Not at that time when I was there in 36, 37, and 1938. So at that time, I got the chance to know Dr. Jones very well. I shook his hand. I feel so honored to have known him.
Let's talk a little about him, and let me ask Cathy maybe to jump in as his granddaughter, and your mom, of course, Helen Jones Woods. Talk a little about his vision and the origin of the band.
What did Grandpa want to do with the band?
He wanted to travel and make money for the school because they were trying to get the school, you know, established and doing good. And he had heard of there was a band on radio that came in, an all-girl band, and he said, well, I have enough girls here going to school at Piney Woods, why don't I start a girls band? And that's how we got started, you know, playing music at Piney Woods. His sister was a music teacher. She taught Coleman Hawkins how to play music, so he was used to musicians. You know.
Wow.
Right. So how did you pick the trombone?
I like watching the slide go up and down, you know. Oh, I could go up and down too, so why the hell don't I play that instrument, you know?
So how many hours a day did you practice?
Pardon me?
How many hours a day were you practicing?
Well, I don't know about the hours, just practice anytime I wanted to. Because we could go over to the dormitory, you know, practice maybe an hour. But I've been kind of lazy. Half an hour was long enough for me.
But now this band was really together. And how did you, what about practicing and rehearsing once you were traveling around and you were working, you know, with...
You're a little hard of hearing?
Yeah, I can hear the things I want to hear, though.
We want you to hear everything that Sally is saying.
If you hear this band, you know they didn't just practice for half an hour.
One of the things that I want to say about Grandpa, Grandpa and his wife, Grace, were very, very, very strategic with the use of music as a fundraiser, because they had the Cotton Blossom Singers and they also had the band. the bands. There were more than one. The guys had a band because in those days, one of the reasons they were an all-girls band was Grandpa did not believe in co-ed anything. The girls were in one section of the campus and the boys were in another section of the campus. And only for a certain number of minutes, not even hours, a day, were they allowed to talk to each other. They were totally segregated. But they understood that music was a very effective fundraising vehicle. And so they put a lot of emphasis on the music, be it vocal or be it instrument. And to this day, Piney Woods School, 101 years old now, continues that tradition of having great vocal and instrumental talent at the school.
And was it also an idea of his that this would create new options for young African American women in terms of the economy? And I will ask Ms. Woods to address it, or
Roz, what she's asking is, did Grandpa see music as an option for young women, as an opportunity for career paths?
His sister taught Coleman Hawkins music, so he was interested in music from the very beginning. And when he saw Phil Spitality had a radio show on Sunday years ago, it was Phil Spitality and his all-girl band. He says, "I got a bunch of women here. Why don't I start a girl band?" You know, and this is how the Sweethearts of Rhythm became, you know, what they are, you know.
Sadie, did you ever think of it as a career option compared to something else that women were doing during those days and times?
Well, yes, I did. From the moment Constable Carter put a trumpet in my hand and told me to blow, she would point to the notes and da, like that.
So you didn't choose the trumpet again. You were told that you would learn to play the trumpet.
But she started me on the cornet in the band, in the marching band. So I went from John Philip Sousa to Louis Armstrong. So we as Lily spoke, we did travel in and around the state of Mississippi with the marching band. So then Professor Jones got the idea that he should have a swing band. So then as cornet player in that band, Constable Carter, who was our music teacher, put a trumpet in my hand. And I played that trumpet until forever. That was it. That was my life. We went on the road with he named the band the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. At that time, we had girls from all walks of life, but he insisted on calling it international because so many of the girls did. We had Indians, we had Mexicans, Puerto Rican girls, and Chinese, yes. I'm sorry, Willie Mae is not here. She's in the wheelchair. She's the little, I'm sure you saw on the pictures with the long braids with Willie Mae Lee Wong, and Helen Jones, and Johnny Rice. The four of us, we are the nucleus of the Sweethearts of Rhythm. And then he started recruiting girls from all over a lot of girls would come from out of everywhere. They found there was a swing band and they would come. So we had girls from just about every state in the Union in the Sweethearts of Rhythm. I could say he named it the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. This is before we had white girls, because we all know that there are girls who even look white, but they were not white. But Roz is our first white girl. American white girl.
So Ross, did you think of music as being your future when you all were young and traveling the world playing music? Did you think that is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life? Did you all want to ultimately be a Melba Liston or a...
Oh, great. I don't come close to Melba, but I remember when I was 16, Eddie Durham came to town with his all-girl band, and I took my saxophone, went into Boston, and up to the Raymore Playmore Ballroom, and asked him if I could sit in, and he said sure. And I sat in, and that was really the first time I had known that girls really play horns and really play real music like here on the radio, and I was just so amazed. And I loved it from that moment on. I thought, this is what I'm going to do. So he asked me at the end of the night if I'd like to join the band, and I said, I don't think so right now because I'm in high school and my folks want me to graduate. But it was in my head. I knew this was something I really wanted to do. And I was playing with male bands in Boston, and the war started, and there were fewer and fewer male musicians available, so I got to do more and more work and became more experienced in big band sounds and big band way of playing. And so I was ready when I graduated in '43 to go on the road, which I did with a white band. Some of you may have heard of Ada Leonard and her all-girl orchestra. They had violins and I believe a cello at one point, and it was very good and very fine musicians, but it was not the sound that I was looking for and the power that I was looking for. And
you were looking for some soul?
Yeah, you've got it.
And she got it. She got it.
And she got it when she came hooked up with you all, huh?
Oh, yes. We had wonderful times.
Oh,
They were wonderful times, but we never forgot our education. Some of the girls, about 22 of us started out, and when some of the parents found out that it was a swing band, they didn't want their girls to, because we were a Christian school at Piney Woods, you know. So some of the parents didn't think it was right for us to play swing. My mother said, well, 22 people can't be wrong. So she allowed me to go with, and even Helen, who was Mr. Jones's daughter, she went with us on the road. So naturally, as everybody knows, we traveled all over the United States and went to Europe for the USO or United Service Organizations during the war. And it worked out fine. We still received our education because at one time when we were traveling on the road, we had two buses, one bus that we slept in, and the other bus, we called it our school bus. And we had a tutor, Miss Crawford. Remember Miss Crawford? And when we got ready to change classes, the bus drivers would park somewhere and we changed classes, and the girls, we were all ages. As you know, as you can see, we were ages like 13, 14, 15, and 16 years of age. And we are all now past 86, between 86 and 91. So we did finish our education, even though we were traveling, playing music, and along with all the rest of the big bands. And the men musicians appreciated us. One lady asked me at an interview yesterday how the men bands like Cab Calloway and Duke Ellington and Dizzy Gillespie and Lucky Millender, Erskine Hawkins, we would that was a time when we were out there too. And they accepted us. They appreciated us. And we had lots of competition with it. We even had battles with them. We'd be on the same stage.
And who won?
They
Who
would
would
play
win?
a set, and we'd
The
play a
women?
set. Well,
The women would win?
The women. Mm-hmm. It was one band over here, a male band here, and a female band here, and they'd play a set, and we'd play a set. So we were accepted. In fact, we are accepted for all these reasons. And one of the points that we made was about the education, because after all, we represented Piney Woods School, Piney Woods, Mississippi, Piney Woods Country Life School. And we tried to maintain that reputation. So the emphasis was still on education. Some of the girls went back into the school and graduated. So last night we were presented with honorary diplomas from Piney Woods School.
At that time, as I say, 1936, 37, and 38. Those were my 3 years at Piney Woods. And I was in the 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. One year we went to school 6 days a week, even on Saturdays. And Piney Woods was known for their 2 jazz bands, but they were male. And this is how the idea of an all-girls band came about. And as a brass band already, it was just a matter of adding the required members for girls. But Piney Woods had 2 well-known boys jazz bands, but we weren't allowed to dance, not on campus. Our focus was education and music. Now, out of the jazz band for boys, as you say, they competed with Duke Ellington and everybody, because at that time, there was a Sims there that played piano and guitar, and he was known as Little, the famous pianist at that time. And they thought of everybody's name with the jazz band with somebody in the famous all-black bands at that time. Well, I traveled with them for 37 and 38. And after that, as I say, Piney Woods was a religious school. And I remember once we played a concert, and the brass band played Let Me Call You Sweetheart. Any of the older people out there remember the song, Let Me Call You Sweetheart? And we played that in the Fair Street Methodist Church. Well, the next day we heard about it. And while it wasn't emphasized as a religious school, we did have services every Sunday. And my daddy was one of the ones that didn't think I should be playing jazz. And when the band started to become very, very popular, that is when he took me out in 1938 after I finished the 10th grade, and I went back home and finished the 11th, 12th, and went to Jackson State.
To get back to something that Sadie said about our competing with male bands.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were interviewed, 3 of us were interviewed for NPR radio, and when I heard the interview about 10 days ago, they had inserted a track from Benny Goodman's band on a chart, and we had the same chart in our music, and they had taped this chart, taken it off the tape, and our chart, that was the same chart that Benny Goodman had played, and the interviewer said, I challenge anybody to decide which one is the girls band and which is the Benny Goodman band. And it was amazing because he put the two tracks side by side, and even I couldn't tell. It was unbelievable. I have to say.
When I was a youngster growing up, I used to hear people complimenting the Sweethearts of Rhythm by saying they play like men.
Yeah.
They play as good as men. As an adult, I've talked to individuals like Quincy Jones and Ray Charles who said to me that you all played better than the men. Did you all realize how good you really were? And I want to go back to Sally's question. When musicians listen to your music today, they say you all are, quote, tight.
Yeah.
In order for a band to be tight, it takes hours of practice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Can we start with you?
Yes, and I want to also preface something that you said. White male musicians were not as kind to us.
Oh, they weren't?
No.
So what did the white boys have to say?
Well, mostly they had nothing to say.
They ignored you.
Yeah. But I've got my chance with the Sweethearts because I had been playing with male bands in Boston, and one day the leader of the male band, Georgie Graham, gave up his band and went on the road with one of the big bands and was playing the Strand Theater in New York at Times Square, and heard about the Sweethearts through word of mouth. They were playing in the Apollo. So during a break in the shows, he went up to the Apollo and heard it, and he was just blown away by the sound. He went backstage and to congratulate the girls and the manager. And the manager, Mrs. Rayleigh Jones, was having a problem because her lead alto player had become ill, and that was Margie Pettiford, who's Oscar Pettiford's sister, and had to go back to Kansas City, so they were without a lead player. And he said, I have somebody for you. And he called me up right from backstage and told me about the band and where they were playing, and you want to join them? And I spoke to Mrs. Rayleigh Jones, and it was decided that after I talked to my mother and dad, she would call me back. And she did that evening, and I said, yes, 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 I'm going. So that was 1943, and I'd been out of high school about maybe 6 months or so. And I joined this fabulous group.
Speaking of practice, Cathy, your mother practiced more than any girl in that band. Helen could,
But she didn't tell it all.
Helen would practice for hours on end. We had regular rehearsals there in this home. We built a home over here in Arlington, Virginia, right at 908 South Quinn Street.
What is the address?
908 South Quinn Street.
All right, I've been looking for that address. Thank you. Yes, I've been looking for that
address. And I have a picture
address.
of our house. You have a picture of
Yes,
our
I
house.
have a picture.
Right behind the Arlington Cemetery.
They moved the house. They were going to destroy it, and they moved it. Do you know where they moved it to?
No, but my cousin here, my cousin's husband, has been trying to trace that house down.
Yes, me
Since
too.
we found out it moved.
Yes, me too.
We could hear them play taps on
At
our
Arlington?
soldiers' grave when they'd have a funeral there. The taps would come right in our window. But we rehearsed in the living room every day, sometimes twice a day, didn't we, Helen?
So Mother was just joking about the hours. We rehearsed for hours.
Really, after we had rehearsals, you would hear Helen. Most any time you could hear Helen practicing, and it paid off. She was a darn good trombone
I don't know
player.
what you said paid off. I didn't get enough money. Your interpretation of paid off needs to go. We need to go over again.
Mr. Jones labeled me Little Miss Louis Armstrong. And Helen said I could play better than Louis Armstrong, but I couldn't hit those notes. I never could go to G above high C. That was too much.
Did you ever meet him? Did you ever meet Louis
Oh,
Armstrong?
yes. I asked him. I only had one question with him. He entertained us at one of his places at one time, and only question I had of him to ask him was just one question: how do you hit that G above I C? How do you do that? He said, just practice, practice, just practice.
Is it true you had a practice piano on the bus?
No,
That's not. That's
no.
a
We
rumor
had
then.
Practice piano
Ms.
on the
Williams.
bus.
No,
Oh.
Ms. Williams sitting back there. We didn't play on the bus. The bus that we out traveling, but no.
Tell us about this bus, because I've read somewhere that this bus was really the very first tour bus in the music industry.
I would believe that.
The young men at Piney Woods built it. You see, Piney Woods is a Piney Woods Country Life School. You could learn any
Skill.
skill at Piney Woods. Any skill you could think of. We did it, from office work to making shoes, the cleaning. We had a dairy, any type of. It was a country life school for training for the head, hearts, and hands of children. You could learn it at Piney Woods School, and that's still prevalent today. I'm sure the president of Piney Woods he'll tell you more about it. You learn anything that you wanted to learn. When you left Piney Woods, you were equipped for life.
So was that bus equipped?
And the bus, the men on the campus built it from the ground up.
But describe it for us. Tell us about this
bus. It was
bus.
a sleeper bus. We had bunk beds, and at one time it slept 18 of us. Was it ever more than 18, Helen?
That was enough.
There were 18. We had bunks. We had triple bunks on either side. The bus was fully equipped with like a home. But it just did, we didn't have a bathtub or a shower. But you could get a hotel, towns that we would go in and get a hotel, and then that's when we could go in and spread out. But as far as rehearse, we would go into wherever we were going to play a dance that night. We used to do one-nighters. And
What's a one-nighter?
a one-nighter is you play Washington, D.C. tonight. Well, tomorrow night we're going to play Baltimore, but maybe Philadelphia. Sometimes we drive, I'm sure we have driven as much as 200 miles through the night to play a dance the next night. Those are one-nighters.
So you would go to bed, and when you'd wake up in the morning, you'd be in another city getting ready for another show.
Getting ready for another show. And then we would go where we were going to play the dance. We would rehearse. In the afternoon. We always had structured rehearsals. You have to practice. You have to rehearse. And one of the things that since we've been here in Washington, have always had the question about the education. There are so many of our schools that have abolished music, and physical ed. Well, this is a terrible thing. We can have them both. We can have our cake and eat it too. we can play a trumpet at night and go to school the next day. We did it.
And speaking of head, heart, and hand, it was emphasized on the campus. And as I say, I was 13 when I went there. And I was there as soon as school closed in Jackson, and I went to Piney Woods for that summer. I was taught shorthand and typing. Now, I was 13 years old. I knew nothing about that. And we went to school, as I say, every day that summer and on Saturdays. And on Sunday, we were expected. We went to Vespers. And after the Piney Woods, you learn to use your hands. We had the trees, we had the cones,
Yes, we did.
and we learned to put them together, make decorations for Christmas. And we were right near the highway. And at that time, we had wreaths and other Christmas decorations made by students in Piney Woods, and they were sold. This was a part of fundraising for the school at that time. And after you did that, you still were expected to keep your lessons well.
Keep your grades
practice.
up.
Keep your grades up.
At that time, we practiced in the dining room at night, in the afternoon, after school. And we would play around with each other's horns. We really learned to play all the instruments while we were waiting for the instructor.
Oh, all right.
We
So you
had our
did try
little-
other instruments besides the ones that were given to you. If you
Yes.
hadn't played your instrument, was there any other instrument you would have wanted to play?
Well, I was being groomed. I always felt this way for church, for religious, because at that time, I had had piano lessons, and I remember my father paying 10 cents a lesson for my sister and me. We took piano
Okay, so
lessons
you did
for
piano
2 years.
as well as trombone.
And yes.
What about you, I'd say?
Oh,
What would you have played? if
I
you
was
had-
playing, one day I was playing the two. We always, everything was music. We would march into the dining room by music. We'd march out by music. Well, I learned to play the double eagle march on the piano. Da 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 dee da da dee da da. Okay. Well, the music teacher of the school stopped. She says, "Are you playing by ear or are you taking by music?" I says, "I'm playing by ear." I was 11 years old. She said, "Well, you come and take piano over to the community house that was your mother's home, where the principal, your grandfather lived."
Yes.
And Mrs. Dishman was a piano, a music
Bertha
teacher.
J. Dishman.
Bertha J. Dishman. Yeah.
Was that Miss Dishman? She always adjusted her bosom before she started singing. Always.
And Miss Dishman said, you come and take piano lessons. Now, isn't that wonderful? A little girl from Carthage, Mississippi. Now, we had to play a piano. Mother had to play a piano with the rolls, and I would try to follow on there. But I mean, that was an oddity. I mean, that was a rarity.
Right, but I bet Roz never wanted to play anything except that saxophone, did you?
Yeah, you know, I was just getting back to what I think Sadie or somebody was talking about one-nighters.
Uh-huh.
The one-nighter that came back to me, we were playing an after-hours spot in, where was it? Seattle.
Excuse me, now this was after you all were the marching band, right?
I wasn't with the marching
Oh,
band.
you weren't, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
She was, remember now, she was our first white girl to come into the Sweethearts of Rhythm.
All right. So you're in the after hour, the gyp
So we
joint.
played the after-hour spot, and which meant that we would be through at 4 o'clock in the morning. And we had a jump from Seattle to Salt Lake City. But the manager came by before we packed up and said, I have a big treat. We have a copy of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit track on the 78 records, and it was banned on the radio.
Yes, it was.
So this was a very big thing to hear. He said, I'm inviting some musicians from Seattle to come over, and if you want to, you can join us and hear this. And we packed up to get ready for our trip, and we went into where the manager had this thing set up in the middle with this little turntable, and he played that track of Billie Holiday singing, oh God,
Strange Fruit.
Strange Fruit, and he let it go over and over again until, first of all, being the only white gal there, it was.
Did you understand right away the Strange Fruit was
Oh yeah,
lynching?
yeah.
You
Oh,
got
yeah.
it right away?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was very embarrassing for me. Nobody else was paying attention to me, but I felt embarrassed. But her voice was just so riveting, and the story behind this, the lyrics was something I've never forgotten. So we finally got into the bus and started for Salt Lake City, which was the fall. We were supposed to be there that night. And we ran into a snowstorm going over the Rockies, and we were just crawling over the Rockies and got to the gig at 11 o'clock at night, just as they were giving back the money to the people who had come to the dance. And so, of course, we were never paid. I was paid on scale, so whatever the union said that job would be, I lost. And everybody else was paid in different ways, so who knows? We all kind of lost. But that was a one-nighter.
When you said Seattle, Quincy Jones told me that one of the first places that Ray Charles ever took him was to hear the Sweethearts in Seattle.
Really?
They were both in Seattle.
Been in the after-hours spot.
Right, it was in an after-hours joint, a juke joint. That's why he named his album the Juke Joint. Okay,
Oh,
he had an
wow.
album named because he went to see you all, and he was a kid. All right, Ray Charles was a lot older than Quincy.
Yeah.
And he took him, and they slipped into a juke joint to hear the Sweethearts of Rhythm play, and he said that it touched his soul.
I wish he would. Does he remember the name of the place? Because I've forgotten it completely.
I don't think so, or he probably would have named the album more than juke joint, right? What night do you remember the most?
The night I remember the most, I think I remember the most the night the police came by. And what were we doing laying there? You got to move this van out of the way. Why in the hell are you holding up everybody? We traveled in an all-girls band, and we slept in the band there. See,
In the bus?
In the bus. And see, they didn't like that idea, you know, us being parked right there in the middle of everything. So I'll always remember that.
Did you get arrested?
No, but
You got harassed.
we got her. He said a lot of things we won't forget.
Sally and I kind of want to fast forward to, we've talked about some of the early days. Let's talk about the days when you all were at the top of your game, when you had the beautiful gowns, when everybody in the entertainment industry knew about you. On the back of the album that Rosetta did,
Yeah.
it says that New Age magazine, a music publication, said that in what is the year? I can't remember. But anyway, you set a box office record, 1945. In 1945, you set a box office record at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. when 34,000 people came to see you all play at the Howard Theater. Number one, how many shows is 34,000 tickets? Because the Howard Theater, For those of you in D.C., what is it, about an 800-seat venue?
I forgot.
1,200? A 1,200-seat venue. Okay, so
This was like 5 shows a day, right?
that's 5
6
shows a day for you all to get to 34,000.
Well, we started, our first show was usually 11 in the morning.
Really?
Before the movie started. So
Wait a
we
minute,
would,
tell us about this before the movie.
yeah,
We have a movie on the screen. It's a theater.
Every theater was
a film, and then we would come out and play a set, and we had whoever was on
the bill.
We were the house band, but then we had people like Billie Holiday and all
Sarah
the
Vaughan.
famous people. They would perform, and we were on the stage, and then we would play a set. We had our own solos and pieces that the band would play.
Your own repertoire.
And then the guest artists, I say like Billie Holiday, would do what they were to do. And then we'd go backstage and sit it out until the movie on the screen. I think they had how many movies a day? Well, we had about 6 sets. They had so many movies every day. So on the screen.
The first show would be at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And it would be packed?
Yes, yes, yes.
On weekdays. Yeah. So how much time did you get, like when you were the house band and you'd come in and you play for Billie Holiday or other
we
people?
weren't really a house band.
No, but you said you worked with the
No, we would
the
just have
headliners.
a session.
But
Let's
how
say-
much time?
Let's say we were at the Apollo Theater for a week.
Right.
You know, just as it goes now.
Did you
A
play
certain
for
day.
her? Did you play for
Oh,
her as well?
yes.
So how
Oh,
much
yes.
time did you have to get that together? Like you'd come into town, you'd go to the Apollo, and you're playing for Billie Holiday. When did you rehearse with her? Did you have time?
Yes. Oh, yes. She
How
would
much?
give us her music.
One of
her
my mother's
music.
favorite stories, who was it? Sarah Vaughan. You couldn't play her music, correct? Was
Yeah,
it?
and they
Tell
walk-
us this story.
It's not a story to tell. This is a serious thing. We weren't good enough for her, and I don't blame her, because at that time she was famous, and they
Yes,
said,
she was.
"Well, we're going to rehearse here, and then Sarah Vaughan will work with the Sweethearts of Rhythm." She said, "Not while I'm living." You see, and she was right. She was a star then, and we were just a young girl with a band, So.
But
Well,
you see, like I said about the men band, they didn't do a Saturday. See, she was, after all, that was our competition. She was a woman musician.
Yeah.
But the men musicians, they never bought, they accepted us.
Well, sure they would.
They,
That was a stupid.
I want to say another thing about Anna Mae Winburn, because she was this extraordinary woman who was, I guess, a little older than most of us, and she took care of us as though we were all her children or her sisters.
And she was your director.
And she was our director. And she had all the cues for the tap dancers, for the comedians, for the trio guys singing, and she had all the cues in her head for every different show. And so every week, whenever we would play a theater, we would get into town, have the rehearsal, whoever was there, and either the day before or the morning before the show started. And without scores in front of her, she just listened to instructions and found out and heard in her head, or heard whatever they said. I could never understand how she kept all this in her head. The cues for the tap dancers and the comedians and everyone on the bill. She was just an extraordinary musician and woman.
Excuse me, did you try to get in touch with her?
Oh, she's been dead for several years.
We didn't try to get in touch.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know, did my mother ever try to be part of the comedy show? Because I want to know,
I was the number one attraction. Could she be that stupid and everybody still laugh? They say, "Oh yeah, she's the main attraction here," you know.
So were you fascinated by the comedians because you worked with all of them? Moms Mabley,
Moms
Red
Mabley,
all of them, Pigmeat Martin, Markham, all of you all worked with all of these great great comedians. Is that what inspired you to do so much comedy, Mother?
No, I'm just gifted.
She got it. She got it.
She got it.
Sally?
At the time the band was being formed, we were taught tap dancing. Now I could do real good to tap, and splits, the high kick, everything that the Rockettes were doing. We were being taught that in 36, 37, and 38.
Well, you see,
And
that's one
we
of
could
the
stand
things
on
we did.
we could stand on our heads. We put on little shows.
So Drumline didn't have anything on you all.
And that's right, in between. And at the time, the band was at the Apollo. I had moved to New York. I went to see them, and just as we are doing now, I thought about what you say, from whence I had come. And I could have been there also. But I remember that Piney Woods was about education. They had the Rosenwald Nursery School through junior college at that time. And
Kindergarten through college.
I had moved to New York, and I continued my college education in New York. I went to Queens College. I graduated from Adelphi and NY.
And you became NYU became a teacher. You
I
became
became
a teacher too, Ross?
for 34 years.
I taught for a while clarinet.
You taught music.
in jazz.
For a while, the clarinet, yeah. which
Mom
didn't
went to
work out.
college, became a nurse.
Yeah.
What did you ultimately do, Aunt
Me?
Sadie? Yeah.
Oh, I had 4 babies and 2 husbands.
We've been asked to do some questions from the audience. Sally, is that okay? Do we have any questions? Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Yeah, couple things. Miss Sarah, I had a chance to talk to you down in Mississippi.
Well, you got to speak up. They can't hear you. Yeah, there's a mic right over there.
You told me what was the first thing that they had you to do for you and your sister? You had to make your own dress?
You have to come.
When you first
You had
go
to-
the mic.
You told him he had to make. We had to make our.
You had to
own
make your
dresses.
own dress when you came
You
to
and your
Piney Woods for you and your sister?
Yeah.
Now, as I say, I was 13 years old. I had seen my mother sew with the pedal machine. And my mother died, I was 8 years old. So for 5 years, my father raised us. And at 13, he thought it was time for us to learn what we were going to need for the rest of our life. And the first thing that I had to do when I first went there was to make 4 uniforms. I had to make 2 for me, 1 long sleeve and 1 short sleeve for me, and 1 long and short sleeve for my sister. And I had never made a straight stitch on the sewing machine.
But you did it.
Miss Gant took the pattern, spread it on her bed, and she cut the first.
Miss Gant
And
was
then
the school nurse.
Miss Gant was the matron.
Yes.
And then I had to do what she had just shown me. And during the summer, you could wear anything except silk and satin. They were too clingy.
Anyone else? You have another
Just
question?
one other question.
Right.
We have a question on this side. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question also on clothing. Cathy, you mentioned, their gorgeous gowns.
Yes.
And we've been seeing such beautiful photos of the sweethearts in all different kinds of outfits. And I've seen some of in the back of the records. There were some that looked sort of like a tropical fiesta, their ball gowns. Can somebody talk about your stage costuming and who designed your clothing? How did that part come about?
Roz, I never wore a gown, fortunately for me, because I had worked with Ada Leonard before joining the Sweethearts, and we had satin gowns and with frills and all sorts of things, and I felt very uncomfortable. So I thought, what am I going to wear now with the Sweethearts? And the first time I played with the Sweethearts, we had skirts and white blouses and wonderful jackets, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't have to sit in one of these god-awful.
Did you like the uniforms, Mother?
Yeah, I liked everything. What the heck?
You're punishing me, aren't you?
Yeah.
I would like to say for President of Piney Woods, what his name?
Dr. Nichols.
Dr. Nichols. I'm sure he's going to speak.
No, not during this. This is strictly for us girls.
Well, he's here, and in naming all of these things, I know he would be able to tell you all, as I mentioned before, all the skills that we were taught at Piney Woods. And
But did you ever make any of the gowns?
Yeah, not gowns. We made the uniforms.
You made the uniforms, but what about the look? The
You mean
pictures,
with the sweethearts?
right? The sweethearts.
I was
What
back
about
in-
the uniforms for the the costumes?
Helen, who made the costumes? Who made our clothes? Somebody. I don't
They worked at the
remember.
school, I don't remember.
Yeah, you must remember that out of just the four of us, Johnny, who is a wonderful pianist. This was a pianist for all time. This lady in this wheelchair, she was with the Sweethearts of Rhythm from the very beginning until the end, until the band broke up. Johnny.
That's for you, Johnny. Another question?
Sure. I know you were the most beautiful swing band out there. That's evident compared to all
He
the
said
male
you all were
bands.
the most beautiful swing band. He knows that for sure.
Tell him we love him too.
I have to ask about, young girls going off together, 18 of you, very young girls, and your parents. Were you just not afraid? Was everything an opportunity? Was it a time of just experiencing life, or were there any fears? Did you take any fears with you to Europe? Or it's remarkable that way. There's so much courage here, and I know you don't think of it as courage, and I know you were all having a good time. But for those of us that have kids right now, 12-year-olds, 17-year-olds, I'm not sure I would let my 17-year-old go off.
I wouldn't either. Not now.
Yeah.
Not now. We were, I could tell you something real quick though. We were 18 virgins. Yeah. So we, all right. Okay. We weren't allowed to touch the males at school. And when we would have a dance, an auditorium this large or larger, we would march around. Well, if you were 16 years old, you could march side and side with a boy. And you cut the corner. When you get to the corner, you switch all around. Now, when you got, as long as you were 16 and over, but up until we were 16, I never marched with one because I had started playing with the band before that. But I never did get a chance to march with a boy.
Did you all
because I wasn't
gossip about
16.
the boys when
No.
you all were on that bus? supposedly asleep. Did you all talk about the boys and the guys that had come to see you all?
I tell you what we did talk about was movies that we had seen and stories. The drama was the biggest storyteller of all. She could tell every movie she'd ever seen. Pauline Brady. But now the men really compared her to, in fact, Joe Jones was her friend, her boyfriend. Joe Jones, I'm sure some of you know.
And Sid Catlett.
Papa Joe
And
Jones.
Sid Catlett, okay. Well, we were friends with all of them, you know. But just as I said, when we started out, we were very heavily chaperoned at school, and we were very heavily chaperoned on the road. So we never had a chance to experience any danger. We didn't know what danger was then.
Right.
But I wouldn't let no sir, I would not let a 17-year-old girl go out on the road with a band.
Another question?
This question is for my grandmother, Roz. I know coming from Massachusetts, it had to have been an incredible learning curve to go to the South from the North. There's a city in Texas that you refused to step foot in, and I would sort of like to hear more about that night that happened.
Well, that was El Paso, Texas. It's seared into my forehead. I was late as usual, packing up my horn after the show, after the dance, and a lot of servicemen in the audience. And one came over, a lot of kids would come over and talk to me about reeds, mouthpiece, what have you, and I was always talking to the kids and always late. And this time, late again, and the girls had gone off on the bus to find a place to eat because we had a long trip the next day. I finally packed up, and a young serviceman about my age asked me where I was going. I said, I'm going to find the place, the cafe, for something to eat. He said, I'll walk with you. So we went out to the street. Of course, it's all gravel, no sidewalks. It's at that time and dark, and we didn't find a cab. However, there was a car circling the street and going by us constantly, and finally it stopped, and there were two sheriffs in the car, and one got out, and he's got the usual 10-gallon hat, which made him a foot taller, and the boots with the heels. And he was just overwhelming, and he wanted to know where we were going and what we were doing, because I was white, obviously, and this soldier was black, and this was not to be condoned in any way, and I knew it, and the soldier knew it, but there we were. So we were put in the car, taken to jail, and the young soldier who was on his way had stopped just for fun to hear the band, and he was on his way to California, where he was going to go, most likely, to the Pacific Theater to fight. And he's in full uniform, and he gets bawled out by the sheriffs for fraternizing with a white person. And I was just so nervous I could hardly stand there because I didn't know what was going to happen to him. And finally, after this degrading ball out, he was told to just run out of here and get out of here as fast as he could and get out of town and never to come back again. So this poor kid just turned around and just ran. Then they came to me, and he took out my wallet, and there's a picture of my mother and father. My mother with a pretty hat on a Sunday, and the whole thing. My story didn't wash. This is my story had been that my white father was going up to see his cousin in Boston. That's why they're standing in front of this house, obviously in New England. And there's my mother, not looking like a cousin. And so that story was demolished right away. And so I was sent up to a cell upstairs. The other sheriff walked me up there, opened a door, and there were fortunately no stars or moon. It was a very dark night, and the room was very, very dark, but I could sense that it was full of young people. I could tell from their voices. They didn't know, they couldn't see me, and I really couldn't see them. In the meantime, I had given the sheriffs the information about where the bus could possibly be and where Mrs. Jones, to contact Mrs. Jones, and she would come and get me out and explain the problem. So this took a while, and I got to hear the stories of these young gals. Some were pregnant, and they had to find money all the time to get milk and other good food for the pregnant gals. And it was just, and some were there and could never understand what they were doing there, just picked up. It was a night I'll never forget, these stories and these young women. And finally, before it became light out, Mrs. Jones arrived with my cousins, Helen, and
Did you go get your cousin out of jail that night?
I went to tell her to stay there as long as she wanted to. No, I did. I go to see her.
And my other cousin was Helen Sane, who was the third alto player, one of my dearest friends, who was part Italian and part black. So these were my two cousins, and I was so happy to see them. And we got a little bawling out and told never to come back to El Paso.
And you never have.
The only time I went to El Paso was between planes to meet my future daughter-in-law in Houston, and I had to change planes in El Paso. And I sat there for 2 hours, and the whole story came back to me. Wow. I wrote it down so I would never forget that.
Right. Another question?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank you and Dr. Nichols for putting this fabulous event together, and also for keeping the tradition of adopting all of these sweethearts as your aunt, because my mother definitely made sure that anyone of elder status to me and positive influence was considered part of the family. I wanted to ask you, though, Ms. Hughes, was there anything in particular that your mother imparted on you from her experience with the sweethearts that helped to influence you in your career choice in forming Radio 1?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I grew up because my mother didn't stop playing music after the band disbanded. You want to talk about what you did after the band disbanded?
I had to laugh. I went to school, got my degree in the University of Nebraska.
But you also would sit in with other bands in the area.
Yeah, I would sit in for a while, but then I found out a girl could play trombone better than me, so I retired myself.
So I've often said in my interviews that I've heard certain women of prominence say that when they were growing up, they wanted to be someone else. I wanted to be a sweetheart because I had these 18 incredible examples. They were fierce, as Beyonce would say. The question about the fear, they were fearless. Whatever was the challenge, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Aunt Rabbit talking about a ship that they were on coming back and an engine went out and they had to hold on to the cups and saucers so that they could eat because the waters were that rough. Well, I don't like rough waters now. Okay, I don't know that at that age I'd be willing to be on the high seas going from one continent to another. And so I had all these incredible examples, and one of the adjectives that has been used to describe me over the years is bold and fearless. Well, I don't see it like them. They didn't see it as fear. I don't, because you just do what is assigned to you to do. You rise to the occasion, and one of my favorite quotations is by Winston Churchill, which is that it's not enough sometimes to do your very best. You have to do what is required of the situation. And I think that's the story of the sweethearts. They rose to the occasion. They did whatever was required of them at the particular time. They were beautiful. They were well dressed. They were talented. They were smart. I think they've gotten a little more shy as they have, okay, because they used to run their mouths. I've heard stories about in Germany, white people asking, Germans asking them, did the black wash off? Did you have tails? Can we see your tails? I grew up with trunkloads of souvenirs that Mom had collected from around the world that none of us in the family know. Do you all still have your souvenirs? Because Mom lost all of hers. Her costumes are gone, her swastikas they brought. Only a few. You have yours, Roz?
They're out there in the lobby.
Oh, okay. That's part of the exhibit, right. So, yes, they influenced me. I didn't have any musical talent. My mother used to...
No, she wouldn't practice. Let her tell the truth. Let her tell the truth. I wasted my money.
So I was very happy that I fell in love with radio because it was still music. It was still the entertainment industry. But yes, I wanted to grow up to be a sweetheart. I mean, I would fantasize.
You are a sweetheart.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Fred Cannon of BMI.
Yes, following that, I would like to ask some of the memories of your travels abroad, like England, Germany, Italy, and France. I know you went to all these countries. I'd like to hear some of your memories of those events and how different they were compared to America.
He said, let's talk about your memories of, what was your favorite country that you traveled?
England.
England? Mm-hmm. Why?
Well, because I read about the English people and everything, and they went out of their way to be nice to us. So I enjoyed seeing in England as I had read about, you know.
Is it true that the discrimination and the segregation and the Jim Crow and the arresting you in El Paso, the hatred of black people in America, when you went to Europe, did you feel that in Europe? Because I've read that Josephine Baker and other black entertainers were just welcomed with open arms in Europe.
Well, that was another time with Josephine Baker.
Yes.
And after the World War II, Europe was flooded with American black musicians who stayed for many, many years and was accepted beautifully when they were not accepted here in this country, especially the jazz musicians. But during the time that we were there, or at least when I was there in Germany and in France, the devastation in Germany is something that I'll never forget, where Dresden, they pointed out as we were driving in our trucks, had simply disappeared from the face of the earth because we had firebombed them. And there was guilt, and but still I remembered being Jewish, what they, not the citizens themselves, but what the government had done to my people. So it was very conflicting being there at that time for me. But I did, during our high holidays, we were in Stuttgart, and I went to services, and there were just a few Jewish soldiers there, and on the stage were young boys and very, very old men, and this was the first time in 13 years that they had been allowed to have Jewish services for the high holidays. And we were given books from the Army, which I still have that, for the services. And it was very, very moving. That's another experience I carry with me that I've loved.
Sadie, your favorite country?
Well, I didn't go. I was having a baby when the
Oh, you were busy.
And I wish
Aunt Johnny?
Johnny, I wish Johnny and Helen and
Rabbit.
Roz went over there, but this is where the sad part comes in, is because, as you see, we are all in our late 80s.
Speak for yourself.
Yes, she and I are the same age.
I've got
Me and Mama look good.
I ain't got there yet. She speak for herself.
Yeah. Helen and I were 11 years old, and we had to sleep in the matron's quarters because we were too young to sleep in the other part of the dormitory when we were in school. You remember? We were same age. But anyway,
we dealt with that on campus because regardless of what you have heard and you know about Mississippi, I was born and bred in Mississippi. And I was in the 8th grade at Piney Woods, and we had one white student in the class, which was a no-no at that time. But he was in the class on campus because it was the closest school to him at that time. And we had white teachers along with other teachers. And I remember when we had 2 Indian sisters that came to Piney Woods from Arizona. And they cried because they had never seen a black person. We were assigned to them to quell their fears. Piney Woods was an international school before it was ever publicized.
Yes. We have another question?
Real quick. Did any of you ever get to meet Ella Fitzgerald?
Did you ever meet Ella Fitzgerald?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever work with Ella Fitzgerald?
No, we never worked with her, but we were privileged to meet her. Yeah.
She was older than we were, weren't she?
Oh, that's right. She was older.
She was older.
Who was your favorite artist during that time? Who did you all really like? Who would you like? Who was your favorite?
Louis Armstrong.
Okay. What about you, Roz?
I liked Billie Eckstine. He was gorgeous, too.
Yeah, he was gorgeous, too.
I like Billie Holiday, and I still love her.
Yeah.
Lily, who would you like? Who's your favorite?
You know the 2 brothers, white brothers that played in the band. One was lost overseas. They played the trombone.
The Dorseys. Jim and Tommy Dorsey.
The Dorsey.
The Dorsey brothers.
Yes, because we played the slide trombone.
Sally, they're telling us we only have a couple minutes left. You want to?
Well, you know, just listening to you and these great questions, did you have any idea the kind of pioneers that you were? And also, you know, these stories that you're telling, did the skills that you learned at Piney Woods help you to kind of go through all of this? And also, what kept you going, for instance, Roz, in Europe with the stories that you're talking about, and in Texas, you know, the commitment to the music, I think, is so intense and so strong. What was it that, you know, allowed you to keep playing?
Well, Piney Woods trained us, like I said, trained us for everything. And I wanted to mention, she spoke of the sewing, all the things that you could learn at Piney Woods. And we had wonderful teachers. The majority of our teachers were white, retired teachers from the North. They would come and teach, and they didn't get paid.
And many were corporate executives.
Yes. Yes.
And after they retired, they moved to Piney Woods. They were furnished housing and meals, as well as assistance in keeping their houses together. We cleaned their houses. We brought them their meals, and they taught. Many of them were PhDs. Some of the most qualified individuals, and they were very serious about the academic rigors at Piney Woods. Mississippi has always had this bad reputation, and when, in fact, Mississippi has some of the most wonderful institutions and people, and has produced some of the greatest musical talent in this country, but Mississippi was the poorest state. It had the largest number of economically deprived individuals, but Mississippi is a great state and has produced incredible individuals, organizations, and institutions. That Piney Woods is 100 and almost 2 years old. There are not a lot of boarding schools. At one time, there were like 30 or 40 black boarding schools in America. I think, what is it, down to 3 or 4? There are only 4 left now out of almost 40 boarding schools. At one time, for black children to get a good education, they were sent to boarding schools. Many of their parents were working 2 and 3 jobs, and they wanted to make certain they were supervised and educated. Now it's down to 4. Mississippi has some incredible success stories, but you don't hear a lot about them.
I lived in New York for almost 60 years. I taught in New York for 34 years. I eventually married a former student from the boys' band, and he played every instrument, and he arranged the music for the Sweethearts when they first got started. He played every instrument, and he was called Little Count Basie.
As in Count Basie.
Little Count Basie. But I always said that music was his first, and everything in life came afterwards. He taught school for 2 years after he graduated from Piney Woods. And of course, I kept on in education until I taught school. But he wanted to be in the post office more than anything else in the world.
Wow.
He put everything aside, but music was his first. And he did get it from Piney Woods.
We've run out of time. We don't have a band. If we did, we would hear the music saying, "Your time is up." Joanne is our band.
Can we give them a
That's our Johnny, you all. That's our Johnny on her piano.
Well, that's her.
Yeah, that's Johnny
And Billie Sims started with a marching band. Sadie Pankey Moore. In fact, Sadie had told us, my name used to be with an I, but I changed it to an S-A-D-Y-E when I went professional. So it's Sadie Pankey Moore. Rosalind Cron. Helen Jones Wood.
The Sweethearts.
Cathy Hughes and Sally Placksin. Thank you.